Good evening, all you little cats and kittens. Welcome to Carol Baskin's whatever. It was an off-the-cuff thing. I felt like reading and talking about one of Eugene Thacker's books. A bit of it, anyway. And I thought, what better thing to do on a Saturday night than to read nihilistic philosophers. Look at that. I'm exposing my bag of chips I got here. I would not have thought that I would have liked these. They were sent to me in a care package from my work. Truffle and rosemary. Would not consider myself a truffle fan. Hello, Ramona. How are you doing? Flaglo, how are you? Would not consider myself a truffle fan, but those things are good. Like, it's a problem. They're good to the point where I need to be careful with them. They're very, very savory. I don't just mean salty. I mean like super savory. You like the color on this, Ramona? I've been playing around with it for a bit. I think it works pretty well. The bokeh in the background there. Maybe better on this camera than on this one. On this one, you're getting a little bit of the rim light. My glasses, they look dirty. I literally just cleaned them with alcohol. And y'all might notice that I've got the Buckminster Fuller sphere back here. There's a reason for it. And that is that I did not know that you could order replacements of these. I've been on the road store many times trying to find replacements for these windscreens because they're very particular. They have this, I don't know if it's rubber, feels like rubber, hexagonal support, and they just happen to work really well to rub your beard on. But I was able to get order a second one by calling customer service and being like, hey, I lost my first one. Is there any way to get another one? And they're like, yeah, it's $40. And then I thought, that's great, because the thing about these is, although they're made for the Rode VideoMic X, they will fit on pretty much any cardioid microphone. Listen to that on there. So any large condenser microphone. They'll fit on small condensers too, but not nice and snug like this. So when that second windscreen comes, I will be doing a stereo hummingbird video on the other channel, not on this channel. But I'm waiting for it. I must be patient. We all must be patient. Life is whizzing by. How are y'all doing? Strangely, Samantha, beard rubbing quality was not listed in the product details, but of all the windscreens that I've had for all the microphones that I have, and I'd be happy to someday do a microphone video, as well as a light video and a camera video. I have a lot of windscreens, dead cats. All right, just to get out of the way. have a scarf over this because, as anyone who owns a guitar will tell you, if you have a strung guitar in a room, this is not supposed to be a guitar playing video, but there's Wonderwall, or a little bit of it. Yeah. So anyone, if you have a guitar, you'll know, and you keep it in the room where you do other stuff. You'll know that if you don't muffle the strings, it will resonate. What's everybody doing on Saturday night before I get into this? So I like what Eugene Thacker has attempted to do here. So the Horror and Philosophy series is 3 books. First one is called In the Dust of This Planet. Second one is Starry Speculative Corpse. Third one is Long Dark Tentacles of Night, I think. Is it? Tentacles Longer Than Night. My jacket. This is in my jacket. Shine On. Yeah, and my jacket says Roger Waters, Us and Them, and then on the back it says Resist. And I have worn this jacket almost every day since I've gotten it, because I love it so much. I do launder it, but I try to launder it as infrequently as possible. KJ's doing nothing. Q is at work. I assume, well, I'm guessing maybe it's died down a little bit, Q. Flaglo is playing some Diablo 3. Flaglo, what are your thoughts on the Diablo 4 gameplay? Because I have thoughts. I saw the cinematic and the gameplay, and I had some thoughts. They weren't great thoughts. Sort of a, what's the point? Like, in what way does this look? And a lot of it is probably, my memory. I have not played. I never really got into Diablo 3. By the time the third one came out, I was sort of out of that. But Diablo 2 I loved, and Diablo, obviously, I loved. I look at the Diablo 4 stuff, and it just kind of, like, this is what I remember Diablo 3 and Diablo 3 looking like, at least. Diablo 2, obviously, wasn't 3D, was it? So, in some ways, it looked better. Flaglo, you haven't seen it yet. Yeah. It's a good cinematic. The guy has a cabinet full of ears on hooks. And that really made me want to recreate that cabinet and put microphones in each one of those ears and have a cabinet of ears. Small one, like one of those small little tabletop armoires. That's maybe this, like 2 feet, you open it and there's maybe like a dozen ears hanging in it, and do stuff with them. Suitably macabre. And, I could put Diablo in the video title and milk that for a couple hundred more views. Lisa, you have been weaving and playing Surviving Mars. Surviving Mars, is that, did that come out of like 5 or 6 years ago? I want to say that I know it. Has like ragdoll physics. What game am I thinking of? I don't know. But that sounds good. Backing to go out of town's watching? What? Ramona? Are you okay? Backing to go out of town's watching. The Fonz, of course. Game design work. 4 years, maybe. Yeah, I think we're thinking of. I think it's the same game. Yeah, my concept of time isn't great, and yeah, the Fonz having like one Spock ear in there. Well, they just think it was an Elven ear, right? If it was Diablo, I thought I turned off the heat. Apparently, I didn't. But anyway, so Eugene Thacker has. I like the idea of what he's doing in that his horror philosophy series. The first one was sort of like a primer, and it was good. It was a little all over the place. The second one is doing a very Legati thing, a very conspiracy against the human race kind of thing, in presenting philosophy as horror. And then the third one flips on its ear and presents horror as philosophy. So I think that's admirable, interesting. It's very niche. It's interesting. His first book, In the Dust of This Planet, I believe Jay-Z wore a jacket that had the cover for In the Dust of This Planet on the back. So Eugene Thacker's famously, or slightly famously, quoted as saying, his book may be the only book where more people have worn clothing with the title of the book on it than have read the book or purchased the book. Now, I don't know if Jay-Z read In the Dust of This Planet, but I suspect he did not. I suspect he didn't even pick out the jacket, right? But it's a good In the Dust of This Planet. It's good. It's evocative, grabby. Starry Speculative Corpse is not as grabby. Cult of Grinning Martyrs, that's grabby. Conspiracy Against the Human Race, grabby. My Work Is Not Yet Done, that's grabby. It doesn't really get much grabbier than I Have a Special Plan for This World. Like, you see that on something, and maybe you just want to read it to make sure that whoever wrote it is not planning to end you or the world. Hello, a random adventurer has popped in. Hextech Gunblade. Hi, Celine has been studying all day. What are you studying, Celine? And will this help you at all? Probably not. So yeah, I like what he went for. I don't know how successful it is, but let's read a little bit of it, and we can see, if you're hanging out, see what you think. See if you think it's doing what it set out to do, or what it's doing for you, if it's doing anything at all. And I'll occasionally do that. Matt Crofts, the main message, philosophical aim of his works. He is well, you know what? I don't know that I can tell you that. I mean, he's a pessimist. He's a philosophical pessimist. He's a nihilist. I don't know exactly what subcategory he falls into, because he does talk about a lot. I mean, he talks about Schopenhauer a lot. Nietzsche also, although not as much. But he's kind of all over the place. I feel like when I read his stuff, I feel like he's still figuring it out. He's still figuring his own specific, you can see the dust. Wow. The AC kicked on and it's all dusty in here. Shit. But Matt, yeah, I think Eugene Thacker is probably still kind of working out exactly, generally just a pessimist, but yeah, I mean, sure, existentialist, pessimist, nihilist, utilitarianist, whatever appellation you want to throw on him. But I feel like he's not floundering. He just kind of draws from a lot of different schools. Once you get to down to a certain level, like if you were going kingdom, phylum, genera, species, kingdom, I forget the ranking system. But yeah, if you were breaking it down like that, probably around the fourth level, I think he's maybe spanning a few things. Anyway, so Starry Speculative Corpse. We just start with the intro. It's fairly short. I think it makes some interesting points. So number 1, Starry Speculative Corpse. Descartes' demon. Sometime around 1639, René Descartes sat down at his desk to write. At issue for him was a simple question concerning knowledge. I'm going to stop there already. So if you hear, there's philosophy speak that is off-putting, and epistemology is probably one of those words that you hear in philosophy a lot, and it's kind of similar to epidemiology. It sounds like a lot of words. It also has sounds similar etymologically. It sounds similar to like it might have religious origins, but epistemology is just a theory of knowledge. So I guess it was inevitable. If you're being philosophical about things, you're eventually going to be philosophical about whether or not you can actually know things. And when in case you don't know this, most people probably do, but when philosophers start talking about epistemology, they're talking about the philosophical theory of knowledge, and what their philosophical theory of knowledge is. I forget who, if it was Spinoza. I forget who actually coined it. But anyway, I just say that because it started out right here as at him was a simple question concerning knowledge. And I don't know if it's going to throw the word epistemology in here or not. Maybe not. I don't see it. Anyway, back to it. Philosophy, theology, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, the arts, and the natural sciences all claim to know things. From them, a cumulative understanding of the self, of others, of the world, and of the cosmos is made possible. But how do we know that what we know is actually true? This is epistemology. What is the foundation on which these disparate fields of knowledge are based? Are there questions that cannot or should not be asked, lest they undermine the knowledge that they are designed to produce? How much uncertainty is tolerated before knowledge becomes doubt? And when does doubt come to a stop, if ever? Hey, Leah, how are you doing? I have not seen one of Leah's plays in a month. I need to. Leo, could you say when your next one is? I want to be sure that I'm there if it's possible, if it's open to the public. So, how much uncertainty is tolerated before knowledge becomes doubt? And when does doubt come to a stop? So yeah, this is epistemology. An abyss opens up. For Descartes, this was a personal as well as philosophical problem. As he writes, and I have this highlighted, some years ago I noticed how many false things I had accepted as true in my childhood, and how doubtful were the things that I subsequently built on them, and therefore that, once in a lifetime, everything should be completely overturned, and I should begin again from the most basic foundations. Leah, you, not for a tad, but you do have a management meeting because of it? Oh, wow. Meaning you have a meeting to be managed, to get a manager. Is that, I assume that's what that means. That's really cool. But of course, it's just a matter of time. So, whatever, Descartes was saying, challenging all of his rote assumptions that he had made throughout his life. Now, how he came to the conclusion that he only needed to do this once in his life, I don't know. I'm not Descartes. I don't claim to be, but it seems to me like if you do it once, maybe you need to do it every decade or so. How is once good enough? But okay. Because he's an astute thinker, as we're reminded here, being the astute thinker that he was, Descartes set out a method for addressing this problem. This is such a good windscreen. Like if I took this off, there would be so much. There's a little more high end, which I like the high end, but actually I'm liking the way this sounds quite a bit better. But see, you just heard that. I think in general it's better to have this so that get a nice even. He set out a method for addressing this problem. The task was, as he notes, ambitious, and Descartes writes that he had been waiting for a mature age at which to undertake this project. Whether the age of 43 was the right age or not is hard to say. I mean, if you haven't, I don't know, if you're not mature at 43, your faculties start to go into decline not too far after that. So it seems like a good age to do it to me. He felt he had been waiting long enough, even too long, and so Descartes writes, "Today I appropriately cleared my mind of all cares and arranged for myself some free time from interruption. I am alone, and at long last I will devote myself seriously and freely to this general overturning of my beliefs." So he was starting from scratch. Of course, it's impossible to start from scratch because your knowledge informs your theory of knowledge. So your knowledge has the way that you have learned and what you've done has already created pathways that exist regardless of what you know. So I don't know. It just seems like sort of like I see the value in it. Definitely. I just don't think it's quite as straightforward as, okay, yeah, I'm emptying out my closet. I'm starting from zero again. You can't start from zero again, I guess would be my retort to that. And I love arguing with people who have been dead for hundreds of years because it's easy to win. The result of these exercises in skepticism are well known to students of philosophy, and when the Meditations on First Philosophy were published in Paris in 1641, they immediately attracted a whole range of responses, not least of all from the ongoing debates over the relationship between philosophy, theology, reason, and faith. Matt is saying, after Descartes, philosophers split between rationalists and empiricists. Yeah. I'm gonna Okay, maybe they did, but I think you can be a rationalist and an empiricist. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole there. Descartes' most lasting application of his let me get this so I can read it a little better. Descartes' most lasting application of his methodological doubt comes in the first of his meditations, where he considers how our senses deceive us. Skepticists. Okay. Okay. I can get on board with that. So I find this interesting here, right? How our senses deceive us, right? So I do think it's interesting. We've talked about this before, how it's bizarre and strange to assume that your senses show you the world as it is. Many people seem to make the assumption that our senses give us an accurate view of reality. In fact, there are many hardline scientists who will say that observation and experiments, that's how we determine reality. And this is where science and philosophy, or one of the areas in which science and philosophy become sort of non-overlapping magistra. And when I was younger, I definitely was very much of the opinion, not so much that if we can't measure it in some way, it doesn't exist, because I knew, right, everybody knows there are discoveries being made all the time. Visible light, and frequencies beyond visible light weren't discovered, or there was a time when we just thought visible light were the only existing form of light was visible light, because we couldn't sense, our eyes couldn't sense light beyond, I forget what the wavelength is, but beyond red, infrared, and ultraviolet. We could measure it in other ways. We could feel it, right? You could heat things with it. You could microwave things with it. But anyway, so I wasn't I very much was in that group that I was like, well, yeah, I'm not saying that we know everything. What I'm saying is that if there's no way for us to measure it, and there's no way for it to have an impact on the world, then we need to discount it. And we need to say reality is that this is reality. We need to, someone needs to draw a line in the sand somewhere and say, this is reality. And I definitely don't feel that way anymore. And I haven't for a long time. And you can use, in my opinion, not just my opinion, but the opinion that I either read or absorbed, or however it got into my head. The opinion that sticks with me is the one that is the one that you can use science, hard science, specifically evolutionary science, to prove this idea that you cannot use your senses to determine any sort of holistic understanding of reality. And the perfect example of this, I mean, there's a lot, but one of the great examples of this is visible light, right? Our eyes adapted to see visible light, not everything beyond visible light. Our senses, and now this was largely because our senses developed. Evolution via natural selection means that everything about us developed in a giant game of let's try a whole bunch of different things, and the things that work are going to succeed, and the things that fail are going to fail. The things that work are generally the things that give living beings the ability to navigate their world in a way that allows them to survive. That's it. If you can navigate your world in a way that allows you to survive better than this other creature over here, you have an evolutionary advantage. And in the big numbers game, eventually you will win out, evolutionarily speaking. There's nothing about evolution that states that if your senses develop to perceive a more accurate vision of reality, then you're going to survive. If we could see ultraviolet light and we could see infrared light, it would not be of significant benefit to our survival. So, I mean, apply that to every sense, right? And then apply that to the way that our brains process knowledge and the way we think about things and the way we deduce things. And what seems obvious to me then is, obviously to a lot of people, I've said this before, but like, just imagine everything I'm saying is prefaced by me saying, in my opinion, and this thing that I read somewhere, I don't remember where, I can't attribute it. You know, it's very unlikely that I've ever had an original thought. So, for instance, and I remember having like long conversations about this with Sarah. If there was, let's just say, if there was if there were ghosts, if there were creatures, if there were spirits, if there were, now I'm not saying I believe in ghosts, I don't, but I believe in the possibility, right? I believe in the possibility of things that we can't detect. If these things had no way of interacting with us or interest in us or hampered our survival in any way, and they existed in such a way that our senses could not detect them, there is no evolutionary reason why we would evolve ways of detecting them. There's no reason, if parallel dimensions exist, and their borders are nearly impossible to cross, there's no reason for our senses to have either the ability to see or to understand them. Right? So our senses are concerned with the things in front of us, the things that are going to get us to survive long enough to reproduce and care for our offspring for a little while. Anything beyond that is gravy. If you're over the age of 24, you are a walking evolutionary atavism. You don't need to be alive, evolutionarily speaking. So I guess the point of all that was just to kind of bring it back around to this idea of what Descartes was saying here about how our senses deceive us. And actually, I think it's coming up to a... Oh, no? I thought it was coming up to... Yes, it is. It is. Okay. Let me continue reading for a little bit, and I'll tell you when I get to the quote that I was thinking about here. So Descartes considers how our senses deceive us. Dreams, hallucinations, painting, Other examples are discussed in instances where we think we know something based on sensory evidence and are in fact deceived. But at least in these instances, we can learn from experience to distinguish dream from reality and the image from the thing itself. Our senses are reliable if used properly. No argument there. But Descartes pushed this doubt even further. What if our senses are by definition deceptive? What if deception is, as it were, hardwired into our very modes of being? Descartes raises this question through a kind of thought experiment. And this is a quote. I will suppose that not God, who is the source of truth, but some evil mind, who is all-powerful and cunning, has devoted all their energies into deceiving me. I will imagine that the sky, air, earth, colors, shapes, sounds, and everything external to me are nothing more than the creatures of dream, by means of which an evil spirit entraps my credulity. I shall imagine myself as if I had no hands, no eyes, no flesh, no blood, no senses at all, but as if my beliefs in all these things were false. Well, Cuba, yeah, ironically, I guess poetically, ironically, but that's exactly the point, right? It's your telomeres only need to get you through child rearing age, which, historically speaking is 13, 14, and, 10 or 11 years after that. So yeah, 23, 24, 25, right around there. Of course, it's not the way it is anymore. I read a study recently that said that the overall fertility rate globally was declining towards 2.1. So, as you probably know, if every couple in the world had 2 children, we would lose population, right? The threshold for maintaining Earth's population right now is everyone has to have at least 2.1 children. You can't have 2 people produce 2 children because factors like child death, you can't guarantee that those 2 children will both themselves have children. And over time, if no one has more than 2 children, the global population declines. Now that's ironic too, because there was a very long period, and it's still, I think, going on right now, where overpopulation is a huge issue. I don't know enough about this study to know if it's how reliable it is or not, but it was about the fertility rates and sperm counts in males, which is apparently dropping for probably really obvious reasons, right? And it seemed that based on the study that our reproduction rate was fast approaching 2.1. And I, for one, would not lament that the negative utilitarianism school of thought on that is all humans should be restricted to 2 children to bring our population down and eventually leave the planet. You're right, Hugh. Yeah. Overpopulation is less of a problem. It's a problem in some areas, but it's a problem in some areas because of distribution of resources. Yeah. However, eventually it would be a problem, right? The Earth cannot sustain infinite people, even if the distribution of resources was maximally efficient, regardless of where you lived, eventually you would reach that threshold. Okay, so Descartes is imagining himself with no hands, with no sensory input. He's in a sensory deprivation chamber. He is not going to allow the deceptive input that evolution has granted and cursed us with to drive him to determine what is real, what is reality, and what is perceived. He's starting over. Another abyss opens, often dubbed the evil demon or evil genius. Here we see Descartes pushing his doubt to an extreme point, a point at which no knowledge is possible because nothing is for certain. I disagree with that too. So these sort of, it's like the point of a dialectic is, I guess I just feel like everyone has to, I feel like people feel like they need to make these large sort of declarative oppositional statements that are definitive and not that nuanced. No knowledge is possible. I guess I believe knowledge can be totally possible. You don't have to be certain about something to know it. You can know uncertainties. Matt, yeah, the demons of Descartes. Right. Yes, that's exactly what he's talking about here. Right. I don't know if you said that before I read this or after. I don't know. But yeah, that's where we're... Samantha, are you into Donald Hoffman's thing that our perceptions are basically like a user interface that helps us navigate our way to fitness payoffs? I think that's an interesting way of thinking about it. And yes, I have read about that. The joke I always make there is life is like a role-playing game, except for the fact that instead of your attributes improving every year, you essentially... They go in the opposite direction. You become... There was a role-playing game that was like that too. I forget which one it was, but where you were having to deal with the decline of your character instead of the inevitable ascension of your character, like most Western and Eastern RPGs and JRPGs, where you just keep getting better and better and better. I'm replaying Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords right now on my iPad, which I love. But I'm at the point right now where I can crush anything. The balance on that game was not great, especially around the end game. You can just force wave, force kill, repeat. Knowing uncertainty, exactly, Q. I'm not thrilled that this is your avatar. I gotta say, it's not, I don't love it. Another abyss opens, often dubbed the evil demon, as Matt mentioned, or evil genius. Here we see Descartes pushing his doubt to an extreme point. Okay, one thought is as good or bad as another. Everything relative, haphazard, pointless. Subject to continual deception, prey to the cunning of unknown entities, dismembered and insubstantial, Descartes has let himself to stand on the precipice of philosophy and peer over the edge. And what he finds there is a terrifying abyss, where there is neither certitude nor knowledge, nor even a single thought, just a tenebrous, impassive silence. Certainly written like a horror novel. Lovecraftian in its descriptors. Another quote, "But this is a tiring project, and a kind of laziness brings me back to what is more habitual in my life. Can we blame Descartes for stepping back from the precipice? Thinking is hard work." But the negation of all thought is perhaps harder. What Descartes inadvertently discovers is at once the ground and the greatest threat to philosophy, the question that cannot be asked without undermining the idea of philosophy itself. Traditionally, the Socratic tradition in philosophy has a therapeutic function, which is to dispel the horrors of the unknown through reasoned argument. What cannot be tolerated in this tradition is the possibility of a world that cannot be known, or a world that is indifferent to our elaborate knowledge-producing schemes. Descartes' meditations begin and end in this mode. But along the way there are gaps, fissures, and lacuna. Did he need to say all three of those same things? In the philosophical edifice, with the evil demon, Descartes stumbles upon a horror intrinsic to philosophy, the thought that philosophy cannot think without undermining and annulling itself. In order to continue its work, philosophy must ignore it, or gloss over it, or skip it altogether. There's a little bit of repetition here, which I would expect were Eugene Thacker speaking in an ASMR video. And so, in the following meditation, a foundation is provided by Descartes, his famous formulation, Cogito ergo sum. "Let him deceive me as much as he wishes. He will never bring it about that I am nothing, so long as I think I am something." So he's clinging to that "think therefore I am." Whatever else is false, existence cannot be denied. Lirio, I'm surprised you didn't know. It was pretty... I mean, GB has like over 3 million subscribers. She's been... she's been advertising it a bunch of places. So yeah, I think therefore I am, right? From this flows an entire legacy of philosophical thinking in terms of Cartesian space, Cartesian dualism, and the privileging of human consciousness over all other forms of being. But it's not so easy to shake Descartes' demon, which continues to haunt his philosophical treatise to the end. It's always there, threatening to undermine whatever conceptual edifice Descartes has constructed. Better to not deal with it at all and continue philosophizing. Maybe. Now, I love this quote. Descartes even confesses, "I am like a prisoner who happens to enjoy an imaginary freedom in his dreams, and who subsequently begins to suspect that he is asleep, and, afraid of being awakened, conspires silently with his agreeable illusions." So that's almost like Stoicism there, then. Giving in to the world as it is presented to you, instead of trying to strip back the facade and see the horrors beneath the skin, the skull beneath the skin. The problem that I have with that is that you can't really do that. Just like I don't feel like Descartes really had the ability to just say, well, I'm just going to throw out everything I know and start from zero. I don't really think he had the ability to do that either. Because you can't stop yourself from either knowing what you know or learning the same way that you used to. You can't stop knowing the things you know. How do you do that? You can ignore them, but it's always going to creep in. It's like saying, I'm going to become a different person. You can't do it. And similarly here, I kind of have this idea that you can't really conspire with your agreeable illusions if you know they're illusions. You, at least not consistently or persistently. It's gonna get you. Once you know that you are trying to stay asleep, once you know that there is a skull beneath the skin and you're choosing not to peel the skin back, you still know about the skull. And eventually, and or occasionally, you're going to want to take a little look-see. And even if you don't, you know it's there, even if you don't actively go after it. So, Kant's depression. We're switching over to Immanuel Kant. On the 12th of February, 1804, Immanuel Kant, those who know Critique of Pure Reason, A Sickness Unto Death, this Kierkegaard, he lay on his deathbed. His eye was rigid. His face and lips became discolored by a cadaverous pallor. A few days following his death, his head was shaved and a plaster cast was taken. Not merely a mask, but a cast of his whole head, designed to enrich the craniological collection of Dr. Gall. Yay, phrenology. Thank you, I like that. You've already got bits of your skull poking out. Going, look, here we are. The corpse of Kant was made up and dressed appropriately, and according to some accounts, throngs of visitors came day and night. Everybody was anxious to avail himself of their last opportunity that they would have for entitling themselves to say, I too have seen Kant. I mean, at that point, go to his grave. Their impressions seemed to be at once reverent and grotesque. Great was the astonishment of all people at the meagerness of Kant's appearance. Yeah, come on. Yeah, exactly, Q. Racist skull science. It was universally agreed that a corpse so wasted and fleshless had never been beheld. Oh, there's no refrigeration. Oh, what were they expecting? Accompanied by the church bells of Königsberg, Kant's corpse was carried from his home by torchlight to a candlelit cathedral whose Gothic arches and spires were perhaps reminiscent of our philosopher's elaborate vaulted books. In his book, A Short History of Decay, E.M. Cioran. Look at that. What? I don't have A Short History of Decay right here. I do have two E.M. Cioran books on. His books have great titles, Cioran. On the Heights of Despair, All Gaul is Divided, A Short History of Decay. Now, he's somebody where it's just like, oops. If you open a Cioran book, he writes like just little aphorisms and one-page things. Here's a little one-page E.M. Cioran from On the Heights of Despair. I am, therefore, the world. I gotta do E.M. Cioran in a sort of posh voice. I am, therefore, the world is meaningless. What meaning is there in the tragic suffering of a man, for whom everything is ultimately nothing, and whose only law in this world is agony? If the world tolerates someone like me, this can only mean that the blots on the so-called sun of life are so large that in time they will obscure its light. Life's beastliness trampled me underfoot and oppressed me, clipped my wings in full flight, stole all my rightful joys. The enthusiastic zeal and mad passion I put into becoming a brilliant individual. Wow. He's not modest. The demonic charm I adopted to gain an aura in the future, and the energy I spent on an organic, glamorous, inner rebirth, all proved weaker than the beastly brutality and irrationality of this world, which poured into me all of its reserves of negativity and poison. Life is impossible at high temperatures. That is why I've reached the conclusion that anguished people, whose inner dynamism is so intense that it reaches paroxysm, and who cannot accept normal temperatures, are doomed to fall. The destruction of those who live unusual lives is an aspect of life's demonism, but it is also an aspect of its insufficiency, which explains why life is the privilege of mediocre people. Only mediocrities live at life's normal temperature. The others are consumed at temperatures at which life cannot endure, at which they can barely breathe, already 1 foot beyond life. I cannot contribute anything to this world, because I only have one method: agony. You complain that people are mean, vengeful, ungrateful, and hypocritical. I propose the agony method to rid you of all these imperfections. Apply it to every generation, and its effects will soon be evident. Maybe in this way I too could become useful to mankind. Bring every man to the agony of life's last moments by whip, fire, or injections, and through terrible torture he will undergo the great purification afforded by a vision of death. Then free him and let him run in a fright until he falls, exhausted. I warrant you that this effect is incomparably greater than any obtained through normal means. If I could, I would drive the entire world to agony to achieve a radical purification of life. I would set a fire burning insidiously at the roots of life, not to destroy them, but to give them a new and different sap, a new heat. The fire I would set to the world would not bring ruin but cosmic transfiguration. In this way, life would adjust to higher temperatures, and would cease to be an environment propitious to mediocrity. And maybe, in this dream, death too would cease to be imminent in life. These lines written today, April 8th, 1933, when I turned 22. Oh. Damn. I just had a flashback to when I was talking the other day about reading that H.P. Lovecraft story without realizing that he wrote it when he was 8 years old. These lines written today, April 8th, 1933, when I turned 22. It is strange to think that I am already a specialist in the question of death. At 22, was it? My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. I felt like the accent I was doing was not quite not Spaniard, really. But I'm horribly inconsistent. But anyway, so that was E.M. Cioran at 22 years old. He ended up living... Wait, is he still alive? He either ended up living to be like in his 90s or he's still alive and in his 90s. Hello, Pink Moon. Hello, JM. Hello, Jessica. Hello, Nick. Oh, Nick. I hope that you feel better. I hope it's nothing serious. And I hope that you either feel better now or will feel better soon. I really like the blue. The blue of this book and the green spine really goes with the palette that I have here right now. But anyway, that's E.M. Cioran. 22 years old. Kind of writing like a 22-year-old. Very precocious. You can be precocious and a genius and still be pretentious. So, we're back to Eugene Thacker. Here's where we started. Oh, Jay, food poisoning from Chipotle. Ugh. It's so easy to imagine, and I don't want to. In his book, A Short History of Decay, E.M. Cioran once wrote, I turned away from philosophy when it became impossible to discover in Kant any human weakness, any authentic accent of melancholy, in Kant and in all the philosophers. That's how you'll know I'm quoting. I'll do some kind of accent. Indeed, for many, the name of Immanuel Kant has become synonymous with a certain type of elaborate, grand, system-building philosophy that characterizes works such as The Critique of Pure Reason, first published in 1781, and I've maybe read 2 books by Kant. That's one of them. But I should have read more, but I admit that I have not been holistically reading Kant. I know that saying his name is walking a tightrope. Indeed, so decisive was the impact of Kant's later critical philosophy that textbooks on the history of philosophy often refer to philosophy before Kant and post-Kant. The significance of Kant's philosophy is, however, counterbalanced by its notorious difficulty. I will agree with that. Oh, Nick. That sucks, and I don't want to appropriate your pain. I had... so I can say this now. The reason I missed not last week's Beyond the Double Red Doors, but the one before that, same reason. It was actually that I had this fatigue and weakness and fog and had gotten a whole lot of blood work. Yeah, there's a zombie. There's a zombie back there. Ding. It's my zombie mask. In the well, yeah. It's made by CFX Studios. They do movie masks. It's silicone. It's a really well done mask, but anyway. So the reason that I missed the Beyond the Double Red Doors 2 weeks ago was because of this fatigue. I'd gotten all this blood work done, and one of the results was horrifying, life altering. Was really bad. One of the results was really bad. My doctor, I knew it, because my doctor said, basically it was like, this receptionist, the medical assistant said, we need to set up an appointment to discuss your blood results. So that's when I knew. I was like, damn, fuck. What does that mean? And yeah, it was bad. It was very bad. However, she said to me that she suspected that it wasn't accurate. So basically, I was either, to me, it was like, oh, okay, so the labs are either right and I'm going to quit my job and go live, I don't know, live out the remainder of my days not working and not planning for the future, or this lab work was wrong. And then went through the next almost 2 full weeks of getting confirmation that the lab work was wrong. Kind of what Kant was, what Descartes was saying, what Cioran was saying about drive someone to the brink of madness and then take it away and they will see life anew and be reborn and be optimistic and happy. And it didn't quite work out that way for me, but I was extremely, extremely relieved. But yeah, that's actually why I missed the podcast before last, because I didn't know at that point. I was waiting. Oh, sorry, Jay. Yeah. Well, imagine like 2 weeks of getting repeat blood work done. Had blood work done 3 times. And it involved other tests as well. So it was like, they just wanted, so it was like they did another test and that canceled out the first one. And then they had to do a third one, because at that point it was just like Carolyn was talking about Wednesday, kind of like that. And the reason that I don't know what I said about it on Wednesday, but I actually didn't know the results for the third test definitively until 2 days ago. So I had the test that said you're fucked, right? And then I had the test that said you're not fucked. And then it was just like, okay, those cancel out. So now we have to do a more extensive test to not just be a tiebreaker, but to be definitive, right? So that third one, which that took almost a full week to get that blood work back, and got it back. Nick, your liver, your AST levels were elevated. I have to watch that all the time because I take a beta blocker. So I constantly have my liver enzymes tested. Thank you all for saying that. Nick, I hope that everything is okay with you. Of course, the fatigue, basically they were like, no, okay, so your blood work is now all normal. You still feel all this horrible fatigue and we don't know what it is. And it was pretty extensive blood work. It was 7 vials. It was the longest that I remember ever sitting giving blood that first time. The targeted tests were much quicker. And it's all healed. But hey, Olevi, how are you doing? Yeah, Nick, hope that you're okay. I mean, ALT, yeah. ALT slash AST or something. I forget what the two values are, but I've had that test a bunch of times. I have to have it every 6 months. Yeah, Nick, I hope that you're okay, but I hope that you're okay, and I hope they're able to find an easily treatable cause for your fatigue. Because for me, it's great that, it wasn't this, not necessarily a death sentence, but certainly I don't want to talk about it too much. It sucked. But it wasn't that, but then it was still like, okay, well, we don't know why you feel the way you feel. So anyway, back to distracting ourselves from our own mortality by the horrors of mortality. So, Kant's philosophy, do you want to think of reading off? Yeah. So reading through Kant's works with their patient and rigorous divisions and subdivisions, there is a sense of philosophy as an all-encompassing, totalizing endeavor. Philosophy in its Kantian modes knows everything. It even knows what it doesn't know. That Kant suffered from depression may come as a surprise. Why would that come as a surprise? It's not come as a surprise to me. Oh, yeah. Especially given the ambition of his philosophical books and the enthusiasm of his wide-ranging intellectual interests. Yeah, it is true. Depression tends to rob you of the motivation to do that kind of thing. His lecture courses cover everything from philosophical logic to anthropology to chemistry to predictions about the end of the world. But in 1798, in a letter to a colleague on the topic of the art of prolonging human life, Kant commented on his own struggle with depression. The comments are rare for Kant, both in the sense of being personal and in the way that they serve as a confession of weakness. In typical fashion, Kant first defines depression as the weakness of abandoning oneself despondently to general morbid feelings that have no definite object, and so making no attempt to master them by reason. Sorry, I meant to read that. The weakness of abandoning oneself despondently to general morbid feelings that have no definite object, and so making no attempt to master them by reason. I still adhere to that. Depression is actually like the natural state. Once your self-deception fails, the sort of natural state of being should be depression. A thought without an object is a troubling thing in Kant's philosophy. It can lead to endless trains of fickle thoughts without any ground, similar to the speculative debates in Kant's time over the existence of God, the origin of the universe, the existence of a soul. Reason becomes employed for no reason, or at least for no good reason. Reason. At issue for Kant is not just the employment of reason over faith or imagination, but the instrumental use of reason mastering itself, including its own limitations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The word reason appears 8 times in that paragraph. And this was as much the case for everyday thought as it was for philosophical thinking. The opposite of the mind's self-mastery is faint-hearted brooding about the ills that could befall one, and that one would not be able to withstand if they should come. I feel like that's so glib and dismissive. I love the hell is his name? Dick Cavett. I love Dick Cavett's quip about depression, which is specifically, I think it was melancholic depression, depression that is so severe that if there were a magic wand that would take it away on the table across the room, it would be too much effort to go and get it. You wouldn't see the point, right? When the coherence of reason is threatened, reason again, so is philosophy, or rather so is the philosopher. A little later on, Kant offers this strange confession. I myself have a natural disposition to hypochondria because my flat and narrow chest. That's interesting. I don't remember this. I have a similar issue. I myself have a natural disposition to hypochondria because of my flat and narrow chest, which leaves little room for the movement of the heart and lungs. And in my earlier years, this disposition made me almost weary of life. So I have like a slight, I'm not going to show you, but I have a slight case of pectus excavatum, which is like a slight depression here. And what that does is it sort of compresses, this is still theoretical, like when I was investigating why I felt arrhythmias and palpitations the way that I did, one of the theories presented by multiple cardiologists was that the nerves of my heart are a bit compressed. And when I wear, they put those monitors on you that you wear for a month, and it records everything, and it's always been normal. The difference between, this is what they say, I don't know if I believe them, or I don't know if this is the extent of it. I'm, of course, catastrophizing more. The difference in their mind is because the nerves are slightly compressed, I'm more sensitive to feeling these feelings. And so therefore, I have the same number of palpitations as the average person, but I notice every single one of them. It's a theory. I don't know. Levy, let's get this on the screen here. I often wonder if depression is overdiagnosed. Sometimes I think we're just simply reacting appropriately to our undesired circumstances. Negative emotions can be considered bad or unacceptable. Well, this is why I'm saying, to me, it just seems like the default state should be depression, right? Depression shouldn't be the outlier. If anything, happiness, I would think, would be more indicative of some sort of pathology at work than depression, given the state of the world. And, obviously it varies from person to person. Anyway. Oh, and also because of this, I tend to compress my vagus nerve doing a lot of stuff, right? So even taking a really deep breath can trigger a palpitation, leaning down, stuff like that. Shit sucks. Anyway, I'm liking this because it sort of We're on page an hour and 20 minutes in, and we're on page 6. Thank you for indulging me. Page 6. Olivia, I'm going to disagree with you here. Happiness is, I think, far more profitable than depression. Different industries, but if you're depressed, you're not doing all the things that you would do when you're happy. You're not consuming in the same way. To pharmacological companies, depression is very profitable. But I think to the economy in general, depression is not profitable. So I don't know. Well, this is a problem, Celine, right? Especially for women, is they will tend to get, just based on their biological gender, they will tend to get written off, not taken as seriously, especially by male doctors, right? So sucks. I think about the diagnosis of hysteria, 100 years ago, and the treatment for hysteria, which was basically like doctor-sanctioned assault. Anyway, where were we? Chapter 6, or I'm sorry, page 6. And when the coherence of reason is threatened, so is philosophy, or rather, so is a philosopher. I already did this. Elsewhere, Kant drops hints of this depression. In the Critique of Judgment, for instance, he allows that misanthropy is preferable, and even has the character of the sublime. Falsehood, ingratitude, injustice. The puerile, the ends which we look upon ourselves as great and momentous. These also contradict the idea of what men might be, if only they would, and are so at variance with our active wish to see them better, that, to avoid hating where one cannot love, it seems but a slight sacrifice to forego all the joys of fellowship with our kind. No idea. Oh, of course, Nasha arrives when I'm doing that voice. But Kant does not give in so easily to this pathology of thought. Philosophy is the panacea. Kant distinguishes philosophizing from philosophy, though both play a therapeutic role in reasoned self-mastery. Philosophizing for Kant does not involve being a philosopher, but instead is a means of warding off many disagreeable feelings, and besides, a stimulant to the mind that introduces an interest into its occupations. Yeah, Nasha, that's exactly what I was saying. Yeah, I'm doing all quotations in an accent. At another level, we're on page 7, everybody. Wow. Amazing. At another level, there is philosophy proper, whose interest is the entire final end of reason, and absolute unity, for grand unified philosophy theory. Gupt. All right, I have to do this now because I just said the word gup and it reminded me of one of my favorite chapters Hold on. Bear with me. I'm not going to be able to find it, am I? Yeah, broken heart syndrome. Levy, yeah. Jane Doe. Oh, yes, it's already answered. What I wanted to find was, in making a joke about a grand unified philosophical theory, it would be pronounced as gupped. It reminded me of what, when I was young, was one of my favorite chapters of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Specifically, the chapter on Scornchellus Zeta, which is the mattress planet, where Mr. Adams took a sort of E.E. Cummings sort of approach to writing it. And at the very end of the chapter, so the mattresses do things that, he invents words for what they do. And one of the things they do is they gup. So it was like, it flumbled, it's very kind of Jabberwocky kind of language. And there's just a single line where one of the mattresses, these are self-aware living mattresses. So in the Hitchhiker's fandom wiki, it's Scornchellus Zeta is a swampy planet found in the Scornchellus system, best known for its mattresses. Its mattresses seem to be used all over the universe, including in the Dentrasi quarters on board a ship that was part of a Vogon constructor fleet. One mattress on the planet talked to Marvin, who was stuck in the ground due to a defective leg. And that's the part I'm talking about. Scornchellus Zeta is a very swampy planet, often covered in mist. The dew, at least in Marvin's opinion, falls with a particularly sickening thud in the mornings. There are gray swamp trees and tall reeds on the surface of the planet. Every morning at sunrise, the sun looks small, cold, and slightly damp before it sinks 14 hours later with a distinct feeling of hopelessness. Shoot, I can't find it. But, yeah, if you have not read, I don't know. It's been a while since I've read it, and shoot, this is all wrapped around me now. If I read it for the first time now, I don't know. I don't know how much I would love it, or think it great, or think it just merely, pretty good. The movie sucked. The original BBC miniseries, I thought that was great. I mean, it was horrible, but it was great. Very low budget, very Doctor Who-y, but like 70s Doctor Who. Uh-oh, punch out, Q. Well, you get overtime. If you don't punch out, you just get overtime, right? All right. This is all fine. from the critical distance of philosophical self-mastery, but things get a little more complicated. But things get a little more complicated when Kant discusses depression. In the same essay, he also discusses boredom, diet, and sleep. What Kant doesn't consider is that reason might actually be connected to depression, rather than stand as its opposite. Good point. What if depression, reason's failure to achieve self-mastery, is not the failure of reason, but instead the result of reason? Ta-da! We arrive at where we had what we'd been talking about just a moment before. What if human reason works too well and brings us to the conclusions that are anathema to the existence of human beings? He's very much here talking about Cioran, Philip Meinlander, Schopenhauer, Hi, Allie. Happy Saturday evening to you. What we have there is cold rationalism, shoring up the anthropocentric conceits of the philosophical endeavor, showing us an anonymous, faceless world impervious to our hopes and desires. And in spite of Kant's lifelong dedication to philosophy and the Enlightenment project, in several of his writings, he allows himself to give voice to this cold rationalism. In his essay on Leibniz's optimism, he questions the rationale of an all-knowing God that is at once beneficent towards humanity, but also allows human beings to destroy each other. And in his essay, The End of All Things, Kant not only questions humanity's dominion over the world, he also questions our presumptions to know that and if the world will end at all. But why do human beings expect an end to the world at all? And if this is conceded to them, why must it be a terrible end? Sorry, I apologize for that. The implication in these and other comments by Kant is that reason and the rational estimation of life's value may not have our own best interests in mind, and it kind of circles back around to what we were talking about earlier, and the mastery of reason may not coincide with the self-mastery of us as human beings, or indeed the species as a whole. Philosophical reason taken to these lengths would not only make philosophy improbable, for how could one have philosophy without philosophers, but also impractical. And what would be the use of such a depressive reason? What Kant refers to as depression is simply this stark realization that thought is only incidentally human. It would take a later generation of philosophers to derive the conclusion of this, that thought thinks us, not the reverse. The legend has it that Kant's final words on his deathbed were, "Enough." The aged peripatetic philosopher of Königsberg let out a word that was also a sigh, and depressive reason seems to have had the final say. Grim. Nietzsche's laughter. Nothing is more indicative of human... I say Nietzsche. Nietzsche. You want me to say Nietzsche? I'll say Nietzsche. I've said Nietzsche like my whole life, so it's hard to get past that. Nietzsche's laughter. Nothing is more indicative of human culture than the obsessiveness with which it has depicted its own planet. When the Earth was decentered from the universe by Copernican astronomy, this was more than compensated for by the innumerable images of Earth produced over the years by artists and scientists alike. The Earth was and is in many ways still at the center of things. In this sense, the first televised images of the Earth can no doubt be regarded as a pinnacle of a species solipsism, one that has its underside in the many computerized film images of a disaster-worn, zombie-ridden, apocalyptic landscape. We are so fixated on the Earth, that is, on ourselves, that we would rather have a ruined Earth then no Earth at all. I don't really follow that. Astronauts often reflect on their first view of Earth as the overview effect, suggesting that the view of Earth from space produces a shift in consciousness, that we as human beings are not separate from the planet on which we live. The general message is that the sublime wonder and unity is that of sublime wonder and unity. National boundaries disappear. Over its surface, the planet reveals strange luminous patterns of color, cloud, and light, otherwise known as cities, smog, and the electrical grid. Thanks to digital technology and the overview effect, this can now be an everyday experience. However, in its appeal for a planetary consciousness, the overview effect tends to reveal something different: the indifference of the planet vis-a-vis our repeated attempts to render it meaningful. It is in this context that one is reminded of Nietzsche's oft-quoted passage from On Truth and Lie in an Extra-Moral Sense. In some remote corner of the universe, poured out and glittering in innumerable solar systems, there was once a star on which clever animals invented knowledge. That was the haughtiest and most mendacious minute of world history. Yet only a minute. After nature had drawn a few breaths, the star grew cold, and the clever animals had to die. That's how Nietzsche spoke. Here Nietzsche gives us a different take on the overview effect. In this version, we have never been one with the planet, nor does the planet require our cleverness and technical ingenuity to save it from ourselves. It is tempting to imagine Nietzsche himself as a present-day astronaut, going up into space, turning back and seeing the Earth, and noticing the contrast between the indifferent glittering planet and the equal indifference of the busy and clever animals on its surface. No doubt Nietzsche's ill health would mean that he would fail to complete the astronaut training, and so he settled for writing it down. But Nietzsche's capacity for undermining the human is perhaps needed now more than ever. On one hand, I feel like I need to bookmark this. We're on page 9 now. We're really going at a good clip here. Yeah, Olevi Ecce Homo, I think. Oh no, it's from Truth and Lie. I was going to say I thought that was from Ecce Homo. Nietzsche's capacity for undermining the human is perhaps needed now more than ever. On one hand, we who are still on the Earth's surface cannot escape an awareness of the impact of climate change, beset as we are by disasters that increasingly refuse the distinction between the natural and the human-made. On the other hand, the process of recuperating the planet for us as human beings continues unabated. Hello, Amy. How are you doing? Whether we can save the planet is one question. Whether the planet needs saving is another. Nietzsche encapsulated this dilemma in the title of his third published book, Human, All Too Human, a book that captures the polyphony of voices in Nietzsche's writing, by turns sarcastic, enthusiastic, naive, spiteful, meditative, joyful. For example, in the second volume of Human, All Too Human, Nietzsche gives us yet another, much more sardonic variant on the overview effect. I'm not going to go with the... Let's see. What would Nietzsche... probably going to go with James Mason with him. There would have to be creatures of more spirit than human beings, simply in order to savor the humor that lies in humans seeing themselves as the purpose of the whole existing world, and in humanity being seriously satisfied with only a prospect of world mission. If a god did create the world, he created humans as God's apes, a continual cause for amusement in his all too lengthy eternity. Our uniqueness in the world, alas, it is too improbable a thing. The astronomers, who sometimes really are granted a field of vision detached from the earth, intimate that the drop of life in the world is without significance for the total character of the immense ocean of becoming and passing away. The ant in the forest perhaps imagines just as strongly that it is the goal and purpose for the existence of the forest. When we, in our imagination, tie the downfall of humanity almost involuntarily to the downfall of the earth. As Nietzsche jibes, the strange endeavor of human thinking tends to eclipse the world until it becomes so philosophically solipsistic that even the non-human by its very name begins to look a lot like the human. Nietzsche caps off this rant with the following: "Even the most dispassionate astronomer can himself scarcely feel the earth without life in any other way than as the gleaming and floating grave site of humanity." Well, like that. Gotta mark that one. Even the most dispassionate astronomer can himself scarcely feel the earth without life in any other way than as the gleaming and floating gravesite of humanity. A cemetery orb. But Nietzsche's phrase, Menschliches, this is not Übermensch, Menschliches, also Menschliches, has several meanings. Certainly it evokes a sense of disappointment, the all too human, as less than human, as the failure to live up to the various standards, criteria, and values that we associate with being human. And as Nietzsche repeatedly points out in his book, this itself has become a hallmark of the human, but the phrase also evokes a more critical sense of failing to challenge our most basic and habitual ways of thinking and living, including the questioning of the same criteria and values that demarcate the human from the non-human. Yeah, apart from Wednesday, I just kind of as the mood strikes. Yeah, this thing is very special. It's unique. It's the if it were all foam, it wouldn't make the same sound. It's definitely the rubber hexagonal structure that kind of gives it that extra something. Look at that. There's a pentagon. Hidden amongst the hexagons. A pentagon. Oh, more pentagons. There are multiple pentagons. Oh dear. Okay. Yeah. At the same time, Nietzsche's invectives against humanity are outstripped only by his refusal to dispense with the term human, much less imagine a romantic, transcendent realm beyond the human, itself the height of humanist thinking. Nietzsche repeatedly affirms this notion of the human, all too human, even as he rails against it. Human beings are all too human only because we fail to live up to the human and what we assume it means to be human, but because we are merely human, only human, and in a way that refuses both the divine fiat of science as well as the natural history of religion's chosen peoples. This is Nietzsche's own tragicomic brand of humanism, that there is nothing special about being human. When Nietzsche began writing Human, All Too Human around 1876, many changes were afoot. The 32-year-old philologist was forced to retire from his teaching post at the University of Basel due to a series of health issues, which included stomach problems, arthritis, migraines, nausea, vomiting, rapidly deteriorating eyesight. Wow, at 32. He had also alienated himself from Wagner and his cultist circle, instead opting for the life of an itinerant scholar. Deciding to relocate to a better climate, he traveled to Sorrento, where he wrote the bulk of the first volume of Human All Too Human. 1878 saw the publication of Human All Too Human, a book for free spirits, comprising some 600 aphorisms. Of the 1,000 copies printed, 120 were sold. The remaining volumes were subsequently rebound together with the second volume for the 1886 edition. The following year, another 400 aphorisms would be published with the title Assorted Opinions and Maxims, and the year after that, another 350 aphorisms with the title The Wanderer and His Shadow. Writing in Ecce Homo some 12 years later, Nietzsche would characterize the book as the monument of a crisis and a spiritual cure. The change in lifestyle was echoed in Nietzsche's writing style as well. While in Sorrento, Nietzsche began writing in the brief aphoristic style that would characterize some of his best-known works. But Nietzsche's aphorisms are not of a single mold, and his turn to the short form manifests itself in different ways. It is hard to see the orientation of the microphone. And also I got to see the book over it without raising it too high. From many essays in the vein of Montaigne to taut maxims reminiscent of La Rochefoucauld. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce that. We also get dialogues, parables, poetry, even jokes. Oh, he was a funny fella. Indeed, Human All Too Human not only reflects Nietzsche's experiments with style, but with reading as well. One anecdote has Nietzsche reading La Rochefoucauld sentence on maxims on the train to Sorrento, but Nietzsche himself gives the detective in us a number of clues. In addition to scholarly works on Greek tragedy and philology, Nietzsche is reading Chamfort, Lichtenberg, Montaigne, Pascal, Varvigneau, Voltaire, the Dedicati of the first edition of Human All Too Human, and of course Schopenhauer, ever Nietzsche's educator and paragon of misanthropic aphorisms. Whew. Man, it was rough. Human All Too Human is a masterclass in fragmentary writing, an exegesis on the virtues of the incomplete thought, as prescient today in our era of the overview effect as it was in Nietzsche's era of Darwinism, the Industrial Revolution, and spiritualism. It's no accident that such experiments on the incomplete thought take as their subject the problem of the human. Above all, the phrase human all too human signals the beginning of a trajectory that would reach across all of Nietzsche's writings and eventually be Wayland Yutani. No. I'm conflating Aliens and Philip K. Dick. More human than human. Signals the beginning of a trajectory that would reach across all of Nietzsche's writings, that would continue into the rediscovery of his work by generations of 20th century philosophers and theorists. The overview effect rendered as the gleaming and floating gravesite of humanity. Were Nietzsche writing today, he might very well regard the flora and fauna of contemporary philosophy, post-human, transhuman, inhuman, non-human, etc., as so many varieties of this impulse to redeem the human through the back door, the side door, the trap door. But Nietzsche himself was not immune to such impulses. For every misanthropic statement, there is a statement of almost ecstatic, embarrassing affirmation, and for every impulse to start a project, there is the equal impulse to abandon it. An entry from Nietzsche's notebook in the fall of 1878 simply reads, novel, a volume of poetry, a history, a philology. An entry from the summer of 1879, perhaps during a bout of illness, reads, "All I lack is a homunculus. Another note from the fall of 1879 reads, "I am thinking of having a long sleep." In his notebook, Nietzsche puts the phrase itself in quotes, but does not give a reference. Olevi, philosophy saved your life. Yeah. It's hard to know cause and effect as if me being this way made me. I don't know if it's so much job made me this way as me being this way made me right for the job. You know what I mean? Balter. Hey mate, can you say... I'm not gonna say anything. Tell me to say I'm not... Amy, I did watch The Good Place. I mean, there were some things that I appreciated about it, but I can't say I enjoyed it on the whole. But I don't know. It's one of those shows that I feel like one season was great. They didn't need to keep going on. Well, Nash, I loved it, but I did not. I mean, they did talk a lot about philosophy, but I don't know, man. Like after a while, just sort of Q, were you just is what the yeah, this is a True Detective reference when I say I don't know if the job made me this way or if me being this way made me right for the job. Well, Balter, I am perfectly fine with that. I'm glad you're here for what it's worth, but I'm not gonna be a monkey. Yeah, I'm not talking down A Good Place. I'm just saying it wasn't for me. That's all. And it was highly recommended to me. I think because of that reason. But it just didn't. I don't know. Didn't do it. Well, pretty much if I go into like if I start saying really, really pessimistic stuff in that sort of an accent, I'm probably doing Rust and Coal. So, yeah. So, the horror of philosophy. When Descartes stumbles across his demon, he discovers a thought that potentially undermines his entire philosophical project. A dilemma presents itself. If Descartes accepts the demon as actual, he has remained true to his method of skeptical doubt. Oh, did something just... Did the quality of the stream just change? He has remained true to his method of skeptical doubt, but then his project is futile since there's no ground for his thoughts, and nothing can be known for certain. Now, if Descartes rejects the demon, either by ignoring it or glossing it over, he can carry on with his philosophy, but he has effectively abandoned the original impetus behind his philosophizing to begin with. And so philosophy becomes a kind of pantomime, passing of the time, wasted energy, everything. That's everything. There is nothing that anyone can do that is not just passing the time. Ooh, let's get more dust in the air there. Midnight Gospel. I don't know it. I've never seen it. What's it about? Should I watch it? You all familiar with M-brain theory? See, M-brain theory states that if you're, I don't know this part by heart. Now, for us, it's a sphere, but to them, it's a circle. To us, it's a sphere, but to them, it's a circle. Either way, it seems that philosophy has to confront the real possibility of its own futility, and the equal possibility that no one will ever know for sure whether philosophy has been futile or not. Nasha, you yelled about the Midnight Gospel. Let me take a moment here. Well, which is it? Is it thought-provoking or is it on Netflix? Oh, this is by the Adventure Time peoples. Pendleton Ward. Oh. Oh, Dr. Drew. I can give it a shot. I enjoyed Adventure Time. Okay. What time is it? We've been going for 2 hours here. And we're on page 14. At this rate, I mean, it's a short book. It's only, let's not include the footnotes, the appendix. 164 pages. So it would only take about 30 hours to get through. I feel like this is the wrong question, Amy. Is anything that gives meaning to life futile? I feel like the question should be, is there anything that gives meaning to life? Well, this is no, it's not true. My teachers did not tell me that. I don't know. I feel like I've definitely, up until this point, I have just sort of coasted through much of my life. Been a bit of a wastrel. Oh, Andrew Cuomo, accused of SA. What else is in the news? I don't mean to be confrontational here, Amy. I honestly don't. But whoops, sorry. Why did it put that? That's nowhere near. It like grabbed a comment from you that's way back instead of the one that I was trying to grab. Meaning is what you make it. I don't believe that at all. Like I definitely disagree with that. But whatever gets you through life, right? Whatever helps you, if it doesn't hurt someone else. This is the stance that I now feel I must take, is I'm going to go through the rest of my life trying within reason not to hurt to cause as little hurt as I can, as little suffering as I can, and that's about all I can. I feel like that's all I can commit to. So, my disdain for religion doesn't come so much. It used to come from, well, how can, why is someone being an atheist? I just feel like an idiot saying that, or an ass for just saying that. Being an atheist, right? I used to be of this sort of, well, how could you believe in God? Well, where's your evidence, right? Where's the, why aren't, it used to come from that. Now it's just like, believe what you want to believe, but man, religion has caused some horrible things to happen. But then again, so has science, right? And so has even medicine. Although people say, medicine is progress, and that's hard to argue with in a lot of ways, but it's also caused a lot of pain. Anyway, yeah, I don't mean to be argumentative. Oh my God. I think we're in like the introduction. We're in the introduction. So we're almost done with the introduction. Let's finish it. This is the crux of the horror of philosophy, which we see in Descartes' demon, Kant's depression, and Nietzsche's wrestling with an indifferent cosmos. Put simply, it is the thought that undermines itself in thought that stumbles over itself at the edge of an abyss. The moment when the philosopher stumbles upon Descartes cannot avoid Kant or actively confronts Nietzsche, the very thing that undermines their activity as philosophers. Being philosophers, they cannot simply switch tracks and opt for poetry or mathematics. So they continue the labor of philosophy, all the while under the tenebrous, impersonal gaze of the horror of philosophy. He overuses the word tenebrous. Far from dismissing philosophy, I would argue that this makes philosophy interesting, particularly if one misreads philosophy in this way. If we were to adopt a method, it might be this: read works of philosophy as if they were works of horror. Of course, this is not to ignore the differences between, say, the narrative fiction of Poe or Lovecraft and the analytic discursive language of Plato or Kant. But at the same time, we know that many philosophers make use of literary elements, Plato's dialogues being a prime example, not to mention Augustine's use of autobiography and Kierkegaard's use of the parable. And we know that many of the classics of the horror genre, from Poe to Lovecraft to the new weird fiction, are largely idea-driven stories and make extensive use of the discursive mode in their narration or dialogue. One imagines Descartes, the accidental necromancer, making hesitant pacts with demons. One imagines Kant swaying before the looming abyss of a Gothic maelstrom. One imagines Nietzsche reveling in the fin de siecle extinction of the species and the attendant exhaustion of vampiric thought. The proposition that governs this book, Starry Speculative Corpse, is that something interesting happens when one takes philosophy not as a heroic feat of explaining everything, but as the confrontation with this thought that undermines thought, the philosophy of futility. Certainly, there is a bit of tongue-in-cheek in this method of reading philosophy as if it were horror, And like all methods, it's not meant to be taken too seriously. But the focus in the sections that will follow will be on those moments when philosophy reveals the thoughts that undermines philosophy itself. When the philosopher confronts this thought that cannot be thought. Why someone saying sorry? What? Yeah, no, I'm definitely not. I'm not a teacher. I don't have the patience. I almost don't have the patience for anything. Like, I don't know how I function, honestly. Okay, we're almost at the end here. Admittedly, the title of this series of books, Horror of Philosophy, is a bit odd. In one sense, it's something of a joke. I would say that's like really ripping off conspiracy against the human race. Sorry. Anyone who has, as a student, been forced to read a philosopher like Kant, or worse, Hegel, has no doubt felt a certain horror of philosophy. The sheer heft of a book like the Critique of Pure Reason is intimidating in and of itself. Yeah, it was extremely... I wouldn't say I enjoyed it at all, and it took me more than one try to get through. And never mind the pages upon pages of jargon-filled divisions and subdivisions that make a mockery of any notions of plain language or common sense. Much of philosophy, well, it's a framework, but yeah, I get it. Much of philosophy today prides itself on instilling this intellectual horror in the reader. It is too serious to be taken lightly, too full of gravitas to joke about, replete with relevance, rigor, authority. But this is not just limited to the obscure corners of academic philosophy. Our public intellectuals and pop philosophers also leverage this intimidation factor in the guise of the know-it-all, the self-help guru, the philosopher as the person authorized to say something about everything, obliging us to stroke our collective beards. Stroke our collective beards in rehearsed gestures of profundity. As a reader, my reaction is something out of a B-horror movie. I recoil in terror, and yet he perpetrates these same things. Like, I mean, but good, he can laugh at himself. Great. But if the phrase horror of philosophy is a joke, it is because it simply reverses the phrase philosophy of horror, thereby pointing to a basic assumption we have about philosophy itself. A philosophy of horror implies a relation between philosophy and its object, specifically that philosophy will either explain its object, whereas in itself it is confusing, give meaning to its objects, whereas in itself it lacks meaning, or render its object clear, apparent, and transparent, whereas in itself it is opaque and hidden. This applies to any formula of the type philosophy of X, where X is philosophy's object, an object that stands apart from philosophy, and because of this can be analyzed, unpacked, and dissected. Today we not only have the philosophy of religion, the philosophy of nature, philosophy of mathematics, political, ethical, moral philosophy, but also the philosophy of cognition, technology, even the philosophy of philosophy, that is, metaphilosophy, and epistemology. Questions arise: is philosophy's object always separate from it? What happens when the critical distance of philosophy collapses? Does philosophy really have the ability to explain everything? Is philosophy's specialization its universality? And if philosophy can't explain everything, or anything, how would we know this? And what language would be appropriate for expressing it? At what point does a philosophy of futility become indistinguishable from the futility of philosophy? That's a good point. The 3 volumes of this series aim to take up these questions in different ways, using different forms borrowed from the history of philosophy. The first volume, In the Dust of This Planet, introduces the general themes, as I said at the beginning, particularly regarding the limits of the human and the idea of the world without us. I kind of feel like In the Dust of This Planet was not initially written to be part of anything, and he's kind of sticking it in, frankly. But so yeah, the general themes, particularly regarding the limits of the human and the idea of the world without us. This volume, Starry Speculative Corpse, aims to, as I've said, read philosophy as if it were horror, while the third volume, Tentacles Longer Than Night, aims to do the reverse, to read the works of the horror genre as if they were works of philosophy. So that was 2 hours and 11 minutes to get through the introduction of a short and not very dense book. This is not the Critique of Pure Reason. This is not David Hume. It is a modern day philosopher who knows the limitations of his audience, I think, and has modernized what he's done. Give me the Cliff Notes any day. I don't necessarily feel the need to go back to the source as long as I trust the interpreter, as it were. I mean, the difference between In Search of Lost Time and remembrance of things past. God, that's how I know I'm tired too. I'm fine with it. So, Saturday night, philosophy as horror, the horror of philosophy. I don't know if that interested you or not. I'm going to have to check out Midnight Gospel. I'll read some more of this, but probably, I'm going to, obviously, finish it. Well, yeah, philosophy starts at Plato, unless you want to say Socrates, but I can't wait to get the second one of these. Because this doesn't work so well if it's not stereo. All right. Well, it's just a quick little stream. Wanted to say hi to everybody. Hope y'all are doing well. And see you soon. Have a good night.